Today's geopolitics briefing leads with the political shockwave out of Kentucky. Congressman Thomas Massie losing his Republican primary. The role of AIPAC and pro-Israel money in funding his ouster, and what that tells us about power, markets, and control inside the American system. Segment 1. What just happened in Kentucky? Thomas Massie, a 7-term Republican from Kentucky's 4th District, just lost his GOP primary to Trump-backed challenger Ed Galrine in what was effectively a nationalized Purge campaign. Despite incumbency, name recognition, and a decade-long record as a consistent conservative, Massie was taken out in a race that became one of the most expensive House primaries in U.S. history. The surface narrative is simple. Trump endorsed a primary challenger. Voters chose the Trump candidate, and another disloyal Republican was removed. The alternative perspective, seen from above, this wasn't a normal local primary. It was a live fire test of whether national money and media can override incumbency and local sentiment when a member steps outside the acceptable line on foreign policy. Kentucky's 4th District became a testbed to see how efficiently the system can discipline a sitting congressman who questions foreign aid, Israel's influence, or the party leader himself, and the result was a clear proof of concept. Segment 2. AIPAC and the money flood. Who funded the ouster and why it matters? The defining feature of this race was not just Trump's endorsement, it was the money. Pro-Israel organizations and donor networks, including AIPAC's political arm and allied groups, poured millions into the effort to defeat Massie after years of him criticizing Israel's influence and voting against large foreign aid packages. Most of that money did not come from Kentucky. It came from national networks that treated Massie's seat as a symbolic battlefield over Israel, foreign aid, and ideological discipline inside the GOP. The alternative perspective. This is what systemic enforcement looks like in the current era. You don't have to convince every voter, you just have to flood one district with enough money, ads, and narrative to make an example out of someone. The message to other Republicans is not subtle. You can talk tough on spending, surveillance, and America first, but if you cross certain red lines on Israel or foreign aid, there is now a well-funded machine that can drop into your district and try to end your career. In other words, the race wasn't just about Massie. It was about setting the price of dissent for everyone watching. Segment 3. Trump's role. Loyalty politics meets donor priorities. Trump's involvement turned this from a messy primary into a loyalty test. He endorsed Ed Galrine, framed Massie as disloyal, and his political operation helped fuel outside spending that hammered Massie across TV and digital. The messaging fused two accusations: Massie as a Trump critic and Massie as anti-Israel, packaging them as a single identity, not one of us. The alternative perspective. The deeper story here is the merger of Trump's personal loyalty politics with the strategic priorities of powerful donor networks. For Trump, going after Massie serves his narrative: punish anyone in the party who steps out of line. For AIPAC and allied donors, going after Massie serves their narrative: show that opposition to Israel funding and influence has consequences. The Kentucky race shows how these two incentives can align. Trump provides the brand and base, the donors provide the cash and infrastructure, and together they can target specific outliers and narrow the range of acceptable opinion inside the party. Segment 4. Optics versus reality. Local voters or national operators. On paper, this was a local Republican primary in a mostly safe GOP district. But the spending levels, the donor geography, and the media narrative were anything but local. National media framed it as a big test for Trump. Pro-Israel groups framed it as a stand against extremism, and the district turned into a stage for competing narratives about what the Republican Party is now. Local concerns about the economy, regulation, or day-to-day governance were largely buried under attack ads about foreign policy positions and Trump loyalty. The alternative perspective. This is the inversion of representative democracy. Instead of a representative going to Washington to fight for their district, Washington and its donor ecosystems come into the district to decide who is allowed to represent it. The voter choice is real in the technical sense. There was an election, ballots were cast, but the menu was engineered by national actors, and the information environment was aggressively curated by money. The optics say, the people have spoken. The structure says, the system just updated its personnel. Segment 5. Generational undercurrents. Younger Republicans versus the donor line. Even in defeat, Massie's base wasn't evenly distributed. He appeared to perform better with younger Republicans and more online native voters who are skeptical of endless foreign aid, hostile to permanent war, and more open to questioning the US-Israel relationship than older generations. Older, TV-consuming voters, the ones most exposed to weeks of high-budget attack ads, leaned more heavily toward Galrain. The alternative perspective, at a systems level, that generational split is a warning light. The donor class consensus on Israel and intervention abroad is increasingly out of step with the instincts of younger conservatives, but the system doesn't need majority agreement to enforce its will. It just needs control of money, media, and candidate selection. In the short term, that means big money can still beat emerging sentiment. In the long term, it suggests growing pressure between what the base actually believes and what the party's funders insist on. Segment 6. Foreign policy fallout. What this means for Washington inside Washington, the signal is clear. If you're a Republican member of Congress who has thought about voting against foreign aid packages, questioning US support for Israel, or criticizing the lobby's influence, you now have a fresh example of what that choice might cost you. The result is not just one lost seat. It's a chilling effect that shapes hundreds of future votes, hearings, and public statements. The alternative perspective, from a systems perspective, this is how foreign policy consensus is manufactured and maintained. You don't need secret conspiracies or backroom oaths. You just need a few high-profile enforcement actions that demonstrate the consequences of stepping outside the line. Over time, this narrows the Overton window in Congress. Members self-censor. Staffers advise caution. Leadership quietly steers committee assignments and fundraising. And the range of acceptable debate on Israel, war, and foreign aid shrinks, even if the public mood is more divided. Segment 7. What to watch this week. So, what should you be watching coming out of the Washington? First, watch how other Republicans talk, or don't talk, about Israel and foreign aid over the next few weeks. You'll see a lot more caution and a lot fewer no votes from the right flank. Second, watch whether pro-Israel groups and Trump-aligned PACs now target other members with similar voting patterns. If Kentucky was the opening move, more primaries could follow. Third, watch the donor disclosures and follow-up reporting. Who gave, how much, from where, and what other races those same funders are getting involved in this cycle. Fourth, watch younger conservative media, podcasts, X accounts, independent channels. to see whether Massie's defeat becomes a rallying symbol or a cautionary tale about taking on the system too directly. The alternative perspective. The key question is, did this race successfully raise the price of dissent high enough that almost no one else will pay it? If yes, then the system just reinforced one of its most important control mechanisms: targeted, spectacular punishment of outliers to keep everyone else in line. If there's backlash, counterfunding, and more candidates willing to pick this fight, then Kentucky might be remembered as the moment people started openly tracing the money and calling the bluff. In conclusion, when a Kentucky primary that looks local on paper but functions as a global signal about who really sets the boundaries on US foreign policy, now we see what happens when you step outside them.